Hey YouTube family, this is Queen Renee coming at y'all again with another video. So tonight what we are going to be talking about, we're going to be doing a little bit of little known Black history. I really think a lot of people know this already, but I did want to talk about it. And so today I'm gonna talk about buck breaking and what it is, and a little of what it entailed for black for male African slaves. So a little short, buck breaking was the the rape of male African slaves. Now, what is buck breaking essentially? It was a form of sexual abuse that was very popular in the Caribbean. It was a way for white slave owners to break male slaves and punish them. This was only used on male slaves. They didn't primarily do the type of rape that buck breaking entailed to female slaves, because what would be the purpose of showing that you can overpower a female as a male? That's not a frightening type of punishment. So the Urban Dictionary definition of buck breaking is the rape and sodomization of rebellious African slaves in the South of the United States of America. Like I said, long story short, buck breaking is the raping of African men slaves by white slave owners. That's the gist of it. Now, where did buck breaking come from? It seems that the buck breaking became a thing when African slave rebellions had increased. Now, they started by just stripping the men and having them flogged while other slaves watched. But however, over time, it became stripping and raping them. And it didn't matter if they were grown men or children, just as long as they were males. The buck breaking became so successful that they started having what they called sex farms, where male African slaves were bred just for the sole purpose of being raped by their white masters. Now let's think about that for a second. Let's talk about that for a second. So the whole act of sodomizing, humiliating black men, they had whole sex farms where they specifically just bred black men in order to rape them. How demonic, how disgusting of a type of people can you be? That's you just you raise you have people have babies just so you can bring them up and rape them. Okay, moving on. So, buck breaking's purpose was to cripple the ego and strength of male slaves. Most slaves would commit suicide after being raped because they could not live with the shame. It has been written in history archives that not only did the white slave masters rape the men, a lot of the times two or more African male slaves were forced to rape each other. Now, that one I didn't know. I had never heard that they were making the slaves rape each other. So they were getting joy out of watching black men rape each other. Not only were they systematically raping these men and taking their manhood, they were making these men rape each other. That's some evil shit. Just call it what it is. That is evil. Downright disgusting. So these rapes were done in front of young male slaves and also the male slaves' families, so that the white master could show that their superiority over the male slaves and their leader, the family leader. So they used this to break the spirits of these men, to make them weak and less motivated to run or revolt against them. Now, I don't know. If somebody was constantly raping me, but I ain't a man, I would think that that would give me more motivation to rebel against them. But I'm not a man, so I guess my thought process would be a little bit different. Um, I don't know, but I would have just thought that that would make the rebellions even more so. Make them really want to get out there and rebel and come against these people. But moving on. Now, there were some records that show that sagging one's pants originated from buck breaking. The masters would force male slaves to sag so as to let everyone know that they had already been raped. It is said that some wore no pants at all or boxers, but I don't think slaves back then had underwear. So they didn't have any pants at all, so that their buttocks stayed out and exposed at all times. Do you? So we have these young men walking around here sagging their pants all the way down up under their butt cheeks. Some of them don't have none of their ass inside their pants. They wear pants down on their thighs and belts to hold them up. And back where that type of behavior was started, you know how degrading that must have been for those men to have to walk around with their butts hanging out, letting everybody know that they done already been got. At some point, somebody, I wish these little boys that keeps their pants down by on their thighs would understand. as to why the older and more woke individuals in our communities try to get them to put their pants up. Try to get them to understand that sagging it's more it means more than what it is that they're doing. So anyway, buck breaking was just one of the many ways African slaves were punished and controlled. Buck breaking was also mixed with breeding farms. So breeding farms were created to increase the population of black people forcefully. In most cases, black men were forced to sleep with their daughters, wives, mothers, or sisters, and the punishment for refusal was death. When this became a thing, once the termination of the Atlantic slave trade became a law, practices were in full swing in order to fulfill the labor shortages. So once the Atlantic slave trade was halted, and they were no longer able to garner slaves through going to Africa and bringing Africans back over here and selling them and trading them and all types of things. Once that was stopped, slavery still was a thing. So they had to come up with a way to get more slaves to continue to work their farms, their land, their plantations. So in order to do that, they began having breeding farms where the men were truly just like treated just like bulls, and they just made them go around sleeping with all of the women so they could get as many babies as they could. This also at some point became a thing before the the Atlantic slave trade law became that thing. Before that was halted. And the reason that they would do it then was because they wanted to find a way to be able to continue to have more slaves without having to pay for them. So if you got 20, 30, 40, 50 slaves, and say 25, 30 of them are women, 40 are women, you really don't need but one man. You don't need but one buck. You need one man to go around and sleep with all these women to make more babies. But say you got 10, 15 men, you got 50 women, you make them sleep with all these women, all of them sleeping with somebody finna catch a baby. May have all of them, half of them knocked up at any given time. Then you got the women that are nursing the babies, the wet nurses. And most of the time those babies, the black babies, didn't even get to nurse much.